April 11th, 1983. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mrs. Fannie Knox.
Francis Cleveland Moat was my gift, but everyone called me Fannie.
When were you born?
Huh?
When were you born? When's your birthday?
Well, it's the 17th of October,
What year?
1987. 1887.
Where were you born?
Resaca, Georgia.
What's the name of the town?
Resaca. R-E-S-S-C-A.
Who was your father?
Who's my father?
Mm-hmm.
He's Stonewall Jackson Moat.
Who was your mother?
Mary Moat. Mary Neal was her maiden name.
Were they both from Georgia?
Yes, they were born, raised, and married there, and I was born there. Left there when I was 4 years old.
How come did you move to Oklahoma?
No, we moved to Indian Territory.
Indian Territory. How come your folks came here?
Well, I don't know. He just wanted to settle in a new country, Indian Territory. I guess he heard a lot of stories. You could get land and everything.
What part of Indian Territory?
Over close to Ryan. You know that little town, Grady?
Mm-hmm.
Close to, well, that's where we lived. Moved there and they had what they had called half dugouts. Now that's what we had, was a big half dugout, and that year he built a house right next to it.
How'd you come to Oklahoma?
On the train.
On the train?
Yes, my father had to. My mother went, we first went to Texas. I'll tell you that. When I was 2 months old, we went to Texas and stayed till my brother was born. We went, then Mama took me and my brother back to Georgia, and we stayed there 18 months. My father came on to the Indian Territory to get us a home or a place to live, you know. And that's when I was 4 years old, and when we came back on the train to Ryan.
Is that in Grady County by Chickasha?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the train trip?
No, I don't. The only thing I remember, that is right when we got there. Next morning we went out and Papa raised a big wash pot up, and he had a big possum under there. And I never had seen one, and I just scared I just tickled him to death to see how frightened we were over that possum.
What'd you do with him?
I guess he ate it, I don't know.
How long did you live in the half dugout?
We lived there, I guess, about 5 years. Of course, we had that new one-room house.
Was that added on to it, or was it?
No, it wasn't that. It was just close to it. We used the dugout for the kitchen and things like that. In the sandstorms, we lived in it in the spring. I'm telling you, it was terrible at times. And we lived right on the road. You know the old Burlington crossing Red River?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where we lived, right close to it, and that was cattle rustlers and horse thieves highway. Many and many herds went by there, but they'd bring them up from Texas, and then they'd bring them back. I imagine they took them up in Kansas. Then they'd bring a herd back to Texas.
Was your father a farmer?
Uh-huh.
What kind of crops did you raise?
Well, just corn, cotton, and peanuts, things, feed stuff, just like
You ever chop cotton?
all my life.
Tell me how you chop cotton.
With a hoe. Chop cotton and corn.
How far apart do you leave the stalks?
Well, about 8 or 10 inches.
How much cotton could you pick in a day?
Oh, I wasn't no big picker. I'd picked over. I tried to get to 200 pounds, but I never did.
Never made it?
No.
What was the price of cotton back then?
I don't know. Don't remember. It wasn't very much, never. It was less than what we get now.
Who had the gin?
Huh?
Who ran the gin? The cotton gin?
I don't know who ran it. But,
Was there one in Ryan?
well, I don't know whether there's one in Ryan or not, but they had one at Grady, the little store and post office. Blacksmith shop where we lived, they had one. But as we got started, we had a 3 years drought, no rain at all, and just burned everything up. It just dried as be, and then we moved from there to Tupelo. Of course, there wasn't no Tupelo there then, just a little town. Post office called Al. Before we went to do our trading and get our mail at Al.
At Al? Where's that
OWL.
Where's that located?
Well, it's not too far from Wapanaka.
Oh, that's down south. Then.
It's south and east.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the academy
It's
was.
in Cole County now.
Yeah.
Of course, it was the Indian Territory and lots and lots of Indians.
Mm-hmm. On the farm down by Ryan, besides cotton farming, what chores did you do?
Chores.
Yeah, on the farm.
I didn't do anything.
You didn't.
Too little.
Didn't help with the laundry?
Oh, yeah, cooked. And I was cooking when I was 8 years old.
What about laundry?
Well, I did the best I could at it.
How'd you do it?
Tub and rubberboard. Washboard, that's what I...
Do you use store-bought soap?
No, we had My mother made soap.
How'd she make it?
She made it with lye and old grease and stuff they have on hand. I never. It was a great big kid for wherever I saw any soap that they bought.
Did you do the laundry inside or outside?
I did it in help my mother, and we did it in that dugout there. Of course, outside, as we moved to Tupelo, or Al rather, we did it outside.
How far is Al from Ryan?
I don't know how far it is. I know we was 2 or 3 days on the road. We went through Ardmore, going down there.
How come you moved to Al?
Away from that Routh.
Okay.
And the day we got to
How'd you travel?
covered wagon.
Can you tell me about that trip?
Yeah, it was wonderful. See, we'd been living on the prairie out there by Grady and Ryan. We hadn't seen any timber. And when we struck the timber, saw those big trees, we called them big fat trees. We just had fits over those big trees, and we called them fat.
How big of a place you have at Al? How many acres?
At Al, I don't know how many acres, but we just rented. We didn't buy, we rented.
Who'd you rent from?
I don't know that. Oh, Lanning. Tom Lanning.
Was he an Indian?
No, he's a white man. He's a bachelor.
Could white men own land in Indian territory at that
Huh?
time? Could white men own land in Indian territory?
Oh, yes. A lot of them clean in blood to get the land, and lots of them married those Indian girls to get it. Many of them. That's how they got their land.
What year did you move to Al?
Well, let's see, I was 8 years old.
About 95.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you start school?
Started school at Grady, and when I lived out there close to Ryan.
What was the name of the school?
Huh?
What was the name of the school?
Prairie something, I don't know.
Remember your teacher?
Yeah, I don't know her name, but I remember her.
What do you remember about her?
Well, I just thought she's wonderful. And
What was your favorite subject?
spelling. I got spelling and reading. I got a certificate was for spelling. I kept that till we moved here, and Jimmy got into my keepsakes. Took that. I don't know what in the world they ever done with it. It tore it up, I guess. I know it sure did hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
What kids won't do. And
Did you ever go to the academy at Wapanucka?
no, but I've been by it. You see, the Indians had a mission school there. So the prettiest girls I ever looked at was Indian girls that went to that school. They wouldn't speak to white people.
How come?
They were so high up, you know, they thought they were so much better than common white people.
Who ran that mission?
Huh?
Who ran that mission
I don't
school?
know. Yeah, I was just a kid when I was, most of the time I lived there.
What school did you go to?
Very seldom got to go to town or any place.
How come?
Well, we just stayed home and worked. We went from there to what they call, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, kite. It used to be called hunting then. It was right next to a big mountain, close to Wapanaka and Bromide Springs. We lived there till I was 16 years old before we moved to where Tupelo is now.
Did they used to take the baths at Bromide Springs?
Yeah, I liked it pretty good, but a lot of people didn't.
What'd you like about it?
Well, it tastes different there.
What did that water taste like?
It's kind of soda, kind of like soda water, something like that.
What does it do for you?
I don't know whether it did anything for me. No. I didn't get to drink it often enough to know. But they had everybody come far and near to drink that water.
When were those baths and those bathhouses set up there at Bromide Springs?
They didn't have any then.
Oh, didn't have any then.
No. Just the springs that they drink from.
Did you go to school at Wapanaka?
No, I went to school there in hunting.
How far did you go in school? How many years?
8th grade.
Eighth grade?
Where I went.
How long did you live at Hunting in Tupelo?
Well, let's see. We left hunting, went to where Tupelo is. Now there's a place they call Colleytown. There's a man, I think, he married an Indian woman, and he had all that land, and he was renting it. See, we just sub-rented it from this Mr. Lanning, but it was a big farm. And then we were there, I guess, a couple of years till the Katy Railroad came through. And then Tupelo was built. While we was living on that farm.
How old were you when you lived at Tupelo?
16.
16. What kind of house you live in?
Log house.
How big was it?
It was about 14 by 16 in one room. We had 3 rooms. We had 2 when we rented the place, and Papa built a big room on the side.
How many kids were in your family?
9.
9.
Yes,
Did you all live in that one house?
we sure did. Well, not all of us, but there's part of them born in later on. Yeah, I'm gonna show you my family picture.
Okay.
Done
1, 2, 3, 4,
a
5,
2-room log house.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, that's one.
Which one are you?
My youngest brother wasn't born then. This is me. That's my sister. Yeah. This one. Now this is Homer down here.
Uh-huh.
That's Charlie and Brian. They both passed away, this last year. This is Lizzie and Lena. They live up over there, but they
Live on the highway in that brick house. That's how Indian Jericho is.
Yeah. Do you remember the Spanish-American War?
Well, I remember something about it, more by some of my girlfriends had sweethearts there, is in it.
Do you remember any, or did you and your family do any work for the war effort?
Huh?
Did you or your family do any work for the war effort?
No, they didn't have nothing like that where we were. Is very thinly settled,
What about Statehood Day, 1907?
What about it?
Do you remember that day?
Oh, yes, I remember that quite well.
Where were you living then?
We were living, well, we'd moved to a place about half a mile from where we first went. We lived in Tupelo.
What'd you do on Statehood Day?
Well, as I remember, we worked in the field. But I'll never forget that day.
How come?
Well, I was a grown young lady, and I thought I was grown. Everybody in that country there is getting to be kind of thickly settled in, and everybody was happy over it.
Did the Indians want statehood?
Huh?
Did the Indians in the area want statehood?
Well, I don't know. We never was, did very few, I knew a few Indian women that I loved, but we were afraid of the others.
How come you're afraid of them?
Well, they were Indians. We'd heard so many bad stories about them, and
What about the one that you loved? What were their names?
let's see. She married a white man. Don't remember what her name was, but I sure did love her.
Did she live in Tupelo?
Yeah, no, she lived out in the country like we did. She didn't. None of us lived in town.
How big was Tupelo?
Well, it isn't very big now.
How big was it then?
Huh?
How big was it then?
Well, they had 2 or 3 stores, shop, church, and school, all things like that.
Who was the preacher?
Brother Baggett.
Brother Baggett. What was he
Yeah.
like?
Oh, he was great. I thought he was. He was our pastor when we lived. He'd go from one place to another, hold big camp meetings, and he'd come to hunting down there. We met him before we moved to Tupelo, and that's where he lived. up there close to Lula and Ada and Jesse, Colgate and all those places. He'd go from one town to the next and through the summer months and hold these camp meetings. But he was a good preacher. He was he couldn't read or write when he's married. His wife taught him to read and write, and he was one of the smartest ministers you ever listened to.
What church did he preach in?
Baptist.
Baptist? Who was the banker in Tupelo?
Oh, we had several. I can't recall their name now.
Were the streets paved?
Huh?
Were the streets in Tupelo paved?
No. Mm-mm.
Tell me what it was like in Tupelo when it rained, the streets.
Well, it was mud up to your, half up to your knees. And of course, the railroad went through, and we had two. One later on, the Oklahoma Central, several years after the Katy. And of course, that's all torn out. It used to run right along the river here. It's nothing down there, but where they had the tracks.
When did they take the railroad out?
It's been around. It's after the war, First World War.
What was it? What, in the 50s they took it out?
Let's see, it'd be
I wouldn't have any idea. I don't ever remember it.
in 19. We moved there in 15. It's taken out between then and 20.
Okay. Do you remember the Depression of 1907?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
And I know one later too. You know, after the war.
Yeah.
You ought to remember a little bit about that.
Well, no, not really.
You don't?
No. Tell me about the one in '07.
Huh?
How did the Depression of 1907 affect you?
Well, it wasn't much different to our regular life, that's to tell you the truth. The only thing that you couldn't get any money, and what you sold you didn't get anything for it hardly at all. It was hard, and I know people did well to live, of course, and made their, grew their living.
Did the banks close then?
Huh?
Did the banks close in 1907?
No, it didn't.
There was just no money.
Just no money. I remember the banker's name if I could just think of it.
Yeah. Which was the worst depression, 1907 or 1930?
Well, I believe 1930 was worse. That is, it affected us more than, of course, I wasn't very old when the first one. And, you know, kids don't notice things like that so much.
I was going to ask, when you were in school, what kind of games did you play?
Well, I played a lot of baseball. And we played, and we'd have singing. All of us kids get in there at lunchtime after we'd ate our dinner and sing. Then get out and play baseball, blind man buff, and everything like that.
What position did you play in baseball?
catcher, not catcher, but where you stand behind the man and it throws the ball.
Catcher?
Yeah,
Shortstop.
one that wears a mask over his.
Yeah, that's catcher.
Uh-huh. Well, that's what I was.
Were you pretty good?
I thought it was. I don't know. I know one time we had one boy that is a little older than we were, and he was real good. And girls wore aprons then, you know, the dresses. Sometimes I'd grab that apron up and catch that ball. Oh, he would sure get us. We
How
had
come?
to catch it with our hands.
With your hands.
Mm-hmm. But I've caught a mini ball before he caught me in my apron.
What'd you do during World War One?
Mhm.
1917, 1918.
Well, we lived right down there on the river where Hud's Pass farm, where we lived on that farm, rented it. Lived right on this railroad. We had a big alfalfa farm. Didn't have too much farming land, but we had lots of alfalfa and stuff like that, and raised hogs and cattle. We shipped the hogs and hay and everything. We had a Thornton switch, what they call it, down this river here. That's where they loaded the cars. One of the hired men run ahead of the train and got them off the track. They never made no effort to get off. They didn't have sense enough to run over them.
Did you do any work for the war effort?
Let's see. I done a lot of work for.
Did you do any knitting for the soldiers?
Huh?
Did you do any knitting for the soldiers?
No, I couldn't knit. He had a bunch of hired men working the hay and crop. And it took all my time to wait on them and my family. But we didn't suffer any. Mr. Abernathy, he was our partner, lived at Purcell. He had half interest in that is, after we bought this farm. And
What was your husband's name?
James Luke Knox.
Where'd you meet him?
Met him at Stonewall. That is between Stonewall and Tupelo. We met him at church. They had a big arbor up there, and in the summertime they'd have meeting and singing in the afternoon. That's where I met him.
When'd you get married?
1909.
Get married in Tupelo?
Mm-hmm.
Did
We married at home.
Brother Baggett marry you?
No, my uncle, he had a church in Stonewall. He came down and married me.
What was his name?
William Hall. Reverend William Hall.
Was he a Baptist preacher?
Yes. He's from Georgia. He married my mother's sister.
What kind of home did you have in 1909 that you were married in?
We had a 3-room, big 3-room box house.
And when did you move down here?
And here we moved down there in 1915. But we was living over at Maysville. That is between Maysville and Story. You know that little store over there, Story? We lived about a half mile east of it.
Was that after you were married?
Yes, that's where one of my girls were born.
How long did you live over there?
Let's see, we lived there about 3 years.
How big a Story?
Well, used to it just had a blacksmith shop and a mercantile and groceries. And a church house. I think that's all that's there now. We went, my daughter took me and we went over there and looked at the place. And the house we lived in had been torn down and they had a beautiful brick house built on it. That just, ever know the Loves that lived up here at Purcell? Used to, you know the old Love ranch house up there, don't you? Well, Grace Love was the one that owned the land where we lived. It's over there between Maysville and Story. Good Washoe bottom land.
I talked to a lady in Purcell whose last name is Love.
Huh?
I talked to a lady in Purcell whose name is Love. I was trying to think what her first name was.
Well, I don't know whether they're related or not, but you remember Buck, Frank, and Bob, and RJ, and all of them used to live there in Purcell, that home place. But they're all gone now, but RJ and Miss Stone, she's over here in Lexington home. Her and I were the same age, or she's 7 days older than I am. I'd like to go see her. She's blind too. But we lived on her farm. Mr. Stone was farming her land when we lived there. They lost every bit of it. Didn't have a blooming thing left.
They lost it.
Yeah, lost
How'd they
it.
lose it?
He didn't know how to manage, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He had that whole Washita bottom in cotton. I never saw such beautiful cotton. One time they had so much of it that they had to hire it hoed, He went and got a load of negroes to hoe the cotton out. And the farmers around there got mad and was going to run them off. And he armed all of his hands and anybody else that would help to stand guard over those negroes while they hoed that cotton.
Did they stay in the area?
The negroes? No, they didn't live anywhere around here. They went to Texas and got those. Mm-hmm. And one year they got, he didn't, but one year here, my husband went down to Texas and got a truckload of Mexicans. And they camped down there in this here pasture right down yonder in the corner. Put up tent, and that's how we got all of our handwork done, you know. And pick cotton. They didn't have pickers like we do now.
What kind of cotton did you raise?
What kind?
Yeah, there's several different kinds.
Well, I don't know the name of them, but my husband always planted the latest. Yeah, they improved the seeds, you know. Well, he always
They
had.
have
They have Egyptian cotton around here.
I don't know anything about cotton.
Well, I wouldn't know either, but anyway, they got it. Some of it would grow so high, you know. They got it more level, and that's kind of he's getting new seed every year, and they'd improve it.
What about the 20s,
20s.
1920s? Where'd you live then?
Well, we moved from down there up here. First day of January, 1920, and then we had a 5-room old house. Bought the farm from Mr. Gallimore. He's Indian, you know, and bought the 160 acres across the road. And then later on, he bought this 10-acre block and built this house in 24.
When is the first time you went to Purcell?
Well, when I lived over there at Maysville, we had a buggy and horse. I'd get my kids and come to Purcell, do my trading lots of time.
How long would it take to get to Purcell?
Well, it'd just take about, you could do it in half a day.
Is that the whole trip here and back?
Mm-hmm. It's not very far. It's 10 or 12 miles from Purcell, I think, Maysville.
What was your first impression of Purcell? First time you saw it?
Oh, I thought it was a big place. Was it then? Ada was bigger than Purcell. But they were up to date on everything. No. The fall we moved, before we moved up here in 20, we was up here and looking at this place. And when we got here, there's the family that lived here was bringing their little boy in. There's a hole washed out way down there and deep in water, and he drowned. I never will forget that woman. She was just prostrated with grief.
How did the Depression of the 1930s affect you?
1930s. Well, let's think back. Well, the 30s was bad too, I'll tell you. That was I remember it more than any of them. Depression, I'll tell you. You couldn't get no money for love or anything.
Of course, you raised all your own food, didn't you?
Oh, yes. We didn't go hungry or anything like that, but we had no money. What they did get is spent on farm machinery.
Did many people from this area move to California?
Huh?
Did many people from this area move to California?
Well, there's quite a few, that is, quite several. All the Gallimores, they had all their land in here, you know. They went to California. He lives, he's not, Mr. Al's down here, he's not a Gallimore, but she is. We bought the farm from her brother.
Did any of them come back?
Yes, she came back.
She did. Where'd she live?
She lives down, you know that house just this side the little creek across the railroad track?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she lived down there in that. That's all this land, not all of it, but part of this land right here north of my line belongs to her. Mm-hmm. And this land down here west of.
Do you know her?
I'm just acquainted with the house.
Her name is Stone.
Huh?
What's her last name?
Alves.
Al. How you spell that?
Alves.
And she was a Gallimore. Her
Huh?
maiden name was Gallimore, is that right?
Yeah, she was Gallimore. We bought the.
The Indian family. Gallimore was the Indian family.
Uh-huh.
That was this land.
Of course, when she went to California, she wasn't married then. Her father and mother went to California. They sold, I think they sold most of their land except this woman down here. She has all that north and southwest of here. Still has it. That place up there on the hill just above the railroad track where the old station used to be, that was hers, which she sold that a few years back, $1,000 an acre. She had 12 acres across west of the railroad track. And that's where my sister, my brother bought, I don't know how much, pretty few acres up there where the house is.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. The man that bought it and built those houses and then sold them, you know, with so much acreage to it.
Mm-hmm. How bad were the dust storms around here in the 30s?
Oh, we don't have very many now.
What about back in the 30s?
Oh boy, we had you couldn't see that fence out there. So bad.
How long would a dust storm last?
Well, it usually lasted sometime 2 days.
What were you doing when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
Well, I don't know. I don't remember. I know it was a shock, though. Let's see, what year was that?
That was December 7th, 1941.
Well, no, it was was bad.
Did you do any work for the war effort in World War II in the 40s?
No. I didn't. I went to several meetings over there and things like that. I had so many hands and everything to cook for it, I didn't have no time.
How many kids do you have?
Huh?
How many kids do you have?
Four girls.
How many grandkids?
Lord, I don't know. Let's see, I actually, this Pearl has 2, 3, 4, 5. Jimmy has 5, that's 10. Francis has 2. No, 3. 2 girls and a boy.
How about great-grandkids?
Oh, I've got a bunch of them. I don't know how many there are.
You have any questions?
Quite a few of them that I haven't seen.
Anything you would ask?
No, I can't, think of anything. We've visited, I've talked in the past about just the transportation and just the rigors of everyday life, that's kind of where all my interest lies.
Yeah. I've got pictures and pictures of them, but I've never really seen some of them at all.
What's your
I got
favorite?
one great grandkid I've never seen.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
Riding horses and having a good time out doing things like that, running wild.
Did you know your grandparents?
No, not really. Just I corresponded with my grandfather, but I didn't like him.
How come you didn't like him?
Well, when we lived in it close to Ryan, he and one of my mama's youngest sisters, his youngest daughter, came to see us. And we couldn't sit down or do nothing without he jumping on us and correcting us for everything. And he liked boys, he liked my brothers, but he didn't like the girls. So I didn't fall in love with him. He was a fine-looking man, all right. He had a home there in Georgia. I've got pictures of the old, the house was built before Civil War. And Dr. Johnson built it during the war while it was a hospital. They had the battle there in the yard and one in my grandpa Mote's yard. And
What part of Georgia is this?
well, it's close to Atlanta.
Was your grandfather
Yeah.
in the Civil War?
Huh?
Was your grandfather in the Civil War?
Oh, yes. When he came from war, he bought this farm from Johnson. And when we went out there on a visit, it's been 20 years ago, the man that had bought it, his name was Johnson too. But the first owner was Dr. Johnson. And my grandpa bought it from him. And I thought that was funny when we went back there, that man that owned it then was named Johnson. That was the greatest trip for me that was going back to my birthplace. And I know I went in there and Smokey took pictures of all of it, you know.
Mhm.
And those, the house logs was pine, and they'd hewed it, and they were square, you know, and they just fit flat like that. And for years, that's the way it was. But they had put weatherboard up on it when I was there on a visit. But up above, under the eave, you could see the bullet holes in those logs where they'd went in when they'd had the battle.
Do you have any idea, Mrs. Knox, where your people came from in Europe? What countries?
No, not Europe. I know Grandpa Moat was a full-blood Irishman. And Grandpa Neil, he looked like a pure deal Englishman.
What's your favorite memory of your mother's kitchen?
Mother's kitchen.
Yeah.
Well, she was, I like for her to, she made me do a lot of cooking. She had a handful with all those kids. But she could cook the best biscuits, ham, anything she wanted to cook, it was delicious.
What'd you like to cook most?
Me,
Yeah.
oh, I like to cook a whole meal. And I take pride in it. Used to. I don't have nobody to eat with me now.
Yeah.
I usually fix a big dinner on Sunday thinking maybe some of the kids will come down.
Where do your kids live?
One lived at Norman, two in the city. Well, I see this Francis and Jimmy. They live in Norman, don't they?
I believe that's right. I think Grace lives in Brownsville.
Pearl and lives in Oklahoma City.
Did you ever make head cheese?
Hmm?
Did you ever make head cheese?
I never did understand you.
Did you ever make head cheese?
Oh gosh, I can't stand that stuff. Yeah, I made it.
How'd you make
We'd
it?
kill 6 to 8 and 9 hogs, you know, every winter. I made it, but I never could eat it.
How'd you make it?
Boy, I put all those heads and feet and stuff in the big wash pot and cook it and let all that meat fall off. Put it in a big pan and season it. Press it and then just slice up it. And it's good for anybody that liked it. But when I worked with anything like that, I never could eat. If it had been left up to me, I wouldn't have cleaned those heads and feet for anybody. But you were wasteful and everything like that if you didn't do it.
In the 1930s, in the Great Depression, what kind of meals did you fix?
Well, it didn't affect our meals much. We raised a lot of our stuff and killed our hogs, and it didn't make too much difference.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
That's all I.
And he'd pea patchy. We'd pick peas in the fall, you know, and put them up for the winter. Shell them out, We wasn't hurt too bad that way. The worst thing is getting sugar. We had our fruit, canned our fruit. I canned all the fruit. And
You dry any fruit?
yeah, I dried some, but it sure is hard to manage. The bugs gets in it. So I just put my time in canning. Better anyway. I like dried fruit. I buy dried apricots now and cook them. I think they're delicious.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
Where were your children born, Mrs. Knox? In the home or in the hospital?
Home. 2 born in this house. I had 6 children. I have 2 babies that's dead.
Did your grandfather ever talk about the Civil War, what he did?
Grandfather?
Yeah.
No, I never was around them. I don't know. See, they lived in Georgia and we lived here.
Okay. Thank you.